Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about a book that Ellen DeGeneres wrote just a couple years ago and what I've learned from it. So, Ellen DeGeneres is a very successful talk show host. I'm sure you've heard of her. She has billions of views on all her videos in total on YouTube, and she's very famous and she's successful. And one of the reasons, well, all the reasons why I wanted to read this book are the following. I wanted to see what makes her tick. Maybe I could get something from her perspective, maybe some tips on how she lives her life, how she's always happy all the time, how she has such a vibrant personality to everyone. Uh, she's also quite an amazing person. What else? I mean, there's so many things. Long story short, she's someone who's financially successful. She's loves her work. She's met and gets to interview and talk to a lot of successful people. So I'm hoping she picks something up from at least one of them out of the thousands she's talked to. Um, and I think she's someone who's very vibrant as a person, and her personality is something I strive towards. You know, there's those instances where I'm just in a situation where it's just very awkward or everyone's silent or whatever, and I'm like, man, if I was Ellen DeGeneres or someone else amazing like that comedian, what's his name, Kevin something, the short one who's African American. I'm sorry, I forgot your last name. And if I was Will Smith, I would just boom, walk into that room and explode with energy. But that's not me. And at the same time, I'm wondering like if that's even possible, because some of these situations, it's just like I don't even know if it's even possible. Like you're not going to get along with anyone, and some of these people I don't even know if, I mean, Will Smith, given he's Will Smith with his fame and reputation, if he walked in, yes, but if he was Will Smith, the guy no one knew, and he didn't have that fame and reputation, and he was just that dude, I don't know. It's still possible. Like honestly, I do think so. There's certain people out there who are pretty vibrant in personality and just can get along and click with everyone and just make everyone laugh. But I don't know. There's some. The point is, you know, there's certain situations that are just amazing, and that's one of the things I want to pick up from this book. So the book's called Seriously, I'm Kidding, and it's the third book Ellen's written. This one's the most recent. The other two were pretty old, and therefore this one's very relevant because she's gone through quite a lot of stuff while between these books. Now she has a talk show. She's won an Academy Award, I believe. Maybe not. A Grammy. It was a Grammy. Many Grammys. Emmy, or is it Emmy? An Emmy, a daytime Emmy, I believe. Numerous daytime Emmys. And she's also done a bunch of amazing things as well. She's uh, filmed, not in person, but she filmed and was a part of Finding Nemo, which became one of the best-selling animated films of all time. Now there's a sequel coming out called Finding Dory. She was a very vibrant personality, done a lot of things, been a judge on American Idol, interviewed and talked to so many different people, established such great relationships. She's a person who just has naturally a damn awesome social skill set. Basically, like, that's one of the people I model or think of when I'm in those weird, awkward situations. I'd be like, what would Ellen do in this situation? Because I don't know if it's just me, but I've been in some situations where it's just like, I suck socially. And maybe it's their fault partially, but I could do much better than this goddamn silence. Or whatever it is, you know, to each their own. Anyhow, so I started reading the book. It's actually a very quick read. I listened to it through audiobook, which I think is a fascinating way of doing it, because when they actually read the book themselves, and Ellen DeGeneres read this book herself, you get a very strange situation where it's almost like she's right before you and just like talking to you in person, because she's oftentimes they put a lot of time into writing this book and they think out what they say. So it's almost like they're right there and they're giving their best advice and just giving their general vibe and mindset. And after reading quite a few books and audiobooks like this, it gets kind of eerie because the more I read these types of books, the more I realize, and along with the thousands of videos from all sorts of different people, I've seen videos from traveling blogs on YouTube, and they have hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and they go about traveling the world. And I've seen videos from guys who prank people and guys who all they care about is getting girls, and then all sorts of different people. You really start to notice that their whole perspective on life and their mindset is very different, from how they approach different situations to how they think. And these things, I think, affect your success in life. So there you go. It's 6 minutes into this video if you're still around, and I've just talked just about the initial background on this book. So let's get started. Let's jump into this. So I'm about a little over a third of the way through this book. It's a very quick book, and do I have to say, this Ellen has a very distinct vibe and mindset and perspective in life that just manifests itself while I'm going through this. And if you've seen her videos, you can get a certain vibe from it, but this book is her telling you her story and how she thinks, and it's just a very interesting perspective, because it's like, okay, that's maybe why these people get through certain things that others don't. You know, I've experienced a lot of different perspectives, from guys who are very negative to my own way of viewing things. And one thing she does is she illustrates how she views negative perspective, negative feelings, depression, bad things that happen to her, and so forth. And so the biggest thing is she just pushes it out of her mind. Like a lot of people do differently. There's different ways of viewing it, but it's hers. It's just it's an immediate thing, but it's not like a forcible, like, I gotta do this instantly. It's more like, okay, don't think about that stuff. Don't think about depression. Don't think about negative thoughts. Push it out of your mind, and boom. She says something humorous. It's always humorous. Like, she is someone who, I've said this before in my other videos, but she has an enormous sense of humor, and she's able to crack jokes almost every other sentence. And I think it helps with rapport building when she's talking to people, whether it's forming friendships after the talk show with successful people, or interviewing people at the talk show, or just meeting people in general. I feel like she was like this before she got famous or successful, and she did a bunch of other stuff. I actually did a blog post about her a while ago, and I researched her, and she had a very fascinating life. She did all sorts of things. I actually listened to her commencement speeches and then read a little bit of her Wikipedia, and she's gone through a lot. And she's 50 years old. You might not believe it, but she's 50 years old, and she's had like a whole smorgasbord of jobs. She's been a oyster shucker, she's been a hostess, she's been a waitress, a salesperson, a vacuum cleaner salesperson. She's worked at JCPenney's, and obviously she did stand-up comedy, and then she did a bunch of other stuff, and it's very interesting. And so her whole perspective is kind of like this lighthearted sense of humor, and it's very interesting because I'm also reading this book called Stumbling Upon Happiness, and it goes into psychology. And one thing it mentions is how we all go through life with our own rose-colored glasses. So the book was really more so talking about how we have these mechanisms in our brain that help us cope and deal with bad events, depressing events in our lives, and so forth. And for lack of a better phrase, make us view the world, the real world, through rose-colored glasses to a distorted perception. And also, it also prevents us from going too far into that and being too disillusional for the most part. And so it's kind of related, but the more and more I see these different people, I definitely think for sure, just based on their experiences, how they were wired, their childhood experiences, their friends, their family, who raised them, all these things come together and people have different perspectives. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. And for me, I'm just trying to pull out the best perspectives and then use them myself. Because, um, some people's perspectives I just think are too extreme and it's not healthy or not good. Whether it's how they're constantly viewing things negatively and then they ramble on that and then they just talk more about it and build on that and then just constantly complain, or Ellen who just pushes that away. She sort of rambles a lot about positive things or just random things and then adds in these jokes like every other sentence, and it just pushes you into a different perspective. And it's very interesting because Ellen, in her book, she is like the master of rambling, and it just illustrates how she is very unfiltered, and there's very few people who are like that. I do think that to a certain extent, all of us have these random, crazy thoughts, but we filter ourselves because it's inappropriate, or we're scared what others will think, or it's just weird. And this is a girl who literally went on for at least 5 pages on the most ridiculous tangent. She started at this weird thing about a beach, and then she just went from the beach to like boats to fashion and people wearing high heels in a bathing suit to, I mean, she can just branch off like crazy. And I don't think it's, certain skill sets are useful for certain professions and so forth. And for her, it's definitely a strength for talk show hosts or just interacting and interviewing others and social skills in general. That may be the worst thing ever in a corporate business meeting. So at first I was thinking, wow, that's amazing. And then I realized, these certain things that she does, people reading this book might think it's annoying and so forth. But what I took from it was that this is something that's very useful for how she talks to people. She never runs out of stuff to say. And again, it may not work for everyone. I'm sure, going too crazy on that line of tangents might annoy someone. And I think another interesting point was that I'm thinking how like Ellen just gets along with everyone and she does so well. And at the end of the day, I do think that's true, but there's still people out there who don't like her, who hate her, think she's annoying, and so forth. So no one's perfect. No one gets it perfectly right, which is something she talks about a lot. And it's just a very interesting perspective for her. And I gotta say, it's a very fascinating. She also talks about a lot of things. She talks about how age isn't something she views as a dilemma or problem. She realizes that we all age and we don't look as good. And she goes on a lot about how stereotypes are horrible, how we shouldn't assume things and we should really just get to know a person first. And then she also talks about how everyone has flaws and we shouldn't keep up this thing about how we're not perfect and so forth, or we shouldn't dwell on our flaws. And she also, again, these are all values and points that she sort of just naturally exerts by her presence. You generally know how she is based on the theme of her talk show. She oftentimes subtly hints at these values while she's interviewing people. And I do think that's something that the more you get to know a person, just naturally their values will sort of seep through. And so it's very fascinating. And she also talks about things like how you shouldn't fall into this rat race of keeping up with the Joneses or keeping up with the Kardashians. And again, she's just very humorous, always throwing in jokes every other sentence. She has a very unique sense of humor. It's almost like this light-hearted, natural, vanilla style where it's family friendly, and then she'll lead you to think something and then flip it another way. For instance, she'll be like, um, uh, I hate this whole thing of keeping up with the Joneses. Who are the Joneses anyway? And so I think it's a very fascinating thing, just like reading this book. Honestly, though, I was reading Oprah's book, which she released only a few months ago. I did a video on that, and I did a video review of it on here. And at first, I was like, "This book's amazing," but I guess I was just biased from just finishing the book. Now it's just like, okay, it was decent, but I do think Ellen's book is in certain ways better. Not all the ways. I do think in certain facets, Oprah's book is better. Neither would I give a 5 out of 5 stars. But this is a very quick read, and I do think if you read it properly, you can pull out certain vibes and certain things from her that I think is maybe very useful. She talks a lot about meditation, and the way she just talks about how she observes things, and then she just rambles and just like from any topic she'll be talking about, she'll just branch off into like 4 or 5 different topics, sometimes bizarre topics, and it's this like endless stream of things. And again, as mentioned, she showed this by like at least 5 pages of just endless talk about like these random things, and people may find that annoying, but I do think it illustrates how far you can take talking. You know, a lot of people worry about running out of things to say. There you go. Ellen shows you how you can never do this. Ellen's one of those people who I just think naturally has a high level of social skill. Whether she agrees or denies it, you know, that's one of the big things I've had a huge problem with. And Ellen is just one of those people who just like, boom, she naturally knows how to fix it. I learned it later on from watching a lot of videos and taking a lot of advice, and I still struggle a lot with it. Well, not really struggle. Struggle is a horrid word. I still, you know, filter myself to a certain extent. But Ellen's someone who just, boom, lets it flow. And some people might hate you for it. Some people might find it annoying. But for Ellen, I think one thing she's done is she's polarized herself, which means, you know, if you don't like me, too bad, you know. And at first, before I was really thinking about this, I thought Ellen wasn't like this sort of person. She was very nice and she appealed to everyone. But as I was reading this book, I realized this was not true at all. She addressed the fact that there's haters out there. She addressed the fact that, you know, she liked certain things that may be controversial. I think generally, if you have like 1 million people viewing you, someone's going to hate you. So there's haters for Ellen as well. Some people who just don't like her. And she's fine with that because she has people that she does like. And one example is she starts talking about Jesus. And she's humorous about it. But again, you know, she brings up a controversial topic, religion, in her book. So she is, to a certain degree, polarizing. Not a deep degree where it's like extreme views on topics and almost pushing you to love or hate her, but it is very fascinating. And again, there's all sorts of little things that you can pull out of the book if you're looking for them and you're really trying to learn something from it. For instance, she talks about her experience on American Idol, and she admitted that she oftentimes said things like, hey, I loved it, when she didn't like the performance at all because she didn't like hurting people's feelings or being negative. And so I do think in certain ways it's a lesson in the fact that, you know, certain professions are more suited for certain people. And so it may be important to play to your strengths rather than trying to cover all bases and do everything right, because just by our finite nature, our limited nature as humans, we can't be everything. We can't be this guy who's rude to everyone and also a guy who's nice to everyone. It can't work. You know, some people like rude individuals because maybe it shows backbone, or they have childhood issues, or whatever the reason. And some people like nice people. And the same thing applies to all sorts of different traits, whether you're funny or not funny at all. Some people despise certain types of humor and they find it really annoying and they hate you for it. You can't please everyone. So again, there's all these little things that you learn from the book, and I'm almost halfway through it. And it's a very quick read. I suggest you guys pick it up if you have nothing better to do. And it is very fascinating how she thinks. She also recommends a lot of funny things, interesting things like yoga and so forth. And I do think it's a very fascinating thing. And she gives a lot of good values that I think have helped her survive in this world that's becoming more and more this rat race and struggle and with this Hollywood life. And I think it can lead someone down the wrong road. And I mean, I see it all the time on Instagram and all this stuff. There can be very good-looking people on the outside, but on the inside, they have all their values wrong, and it may lead them down horrible paths in the future. Maybe they're constantly stuck in this rat race of who has the better, fancier car, or who's prettier, or who's doing what, and it can just lead to horrible places. And you don't need to follow that. So again, that's all I have to say in a nutshell about reading this book. And I do think, the book hasn't gotten completely positive reviews. I'm hearing like on an average of like 3.5 stars out of 5 stars. And again, some parts of it are kind of rambly for sure. She will go on for almost a while, a long time on just random topics. And it's a very informal book. But the whole point of it is humor. Her whole book's filled with humor. Like when she's rambling or when all of a sudden a sentence cuts off and the chapter ends, it's humor. Basically, that chapter ended because she was saying like, oh, if I keep looking at that beach and that whatever it was, something in the distance, I'll fall asleep and then I won't be able to finish this sentence, and then she stops. So it's a book that's not to be taken too seriously, and it's really opens the door and lets you live from her perspective. It's a very fascinating world, and I think it's something people should do a lot more of. There's so many people who only view their lives from their own perspective, and they've never been told that you should try something different. And the more and more I think about it, it's just very, very fascinating. The more and more people I see, telling them their story on YouTube. I mean, I've watched tens of thousands of videos on YouTube from thousands of channels, and their whole life, their whole world is oftentimes, at least a section of it is on YouTube, and their whole perspective just bleeds through, and it's just exceptionally fascinating because some people, they'll just be like, very lighthearted, and their world will be this, and their passion will be this, and then other people are like completely different perspectives. All they care about is this, and they're very cocky, and they love life, and they view it in sort of a weird perspective because it's oftentimes distorted because of what they value in life. If it's just bodybuilding or getting girls, it can sort of warp their perspective. And I think, because we're finite individuals, and sometimes because we don't know any better, you can never be a full individual who has every possible perspective. But I do think it's very useful seeing all these different perspectives because it put things into perspectives. I didn't do that on purpose. But long story short, it's very fascinating. What I'm trying to do, and again, I think we're genetically suited to be a certain way of personality, but I do think we are flexible enough to move about. And so there's one thing I'm trying to do is be flexible enough to take certain things from people I respect. So Ellen, I'm going to pull from her when I need social skills, when I need a bit of a sense of humor, when I need to be more lighthearted about life, when I need to really get a better sense of true eternal happiness. Whether I'm having a horrible, horrible time in my life, I got my knees cut off, or I'm in a car crash, or I got cancer, or all this sort of stuff. And on the flip side, I take different perspectives from other people in different situations, because I do think certain perspectives help in certain ways, and sometimes they're too focused or uh, knowledgeable on other areas of life, and it stunts their growth, or it hurts them, or it just doesn't do them well, or pushes them in the opposite direction they want to go. So negative, depressing, spiraling mindsets and perspectives and beliefs, and it just spirals into this cycle where, for instance, someone can just talk about something negative, which will lead them to something more negative, and they're just constantly spiraling downward. And it is a fascinating world. I'll see you guys later. As always, like and subscribe. And I'm very fascinated to see if anyone's watched this entire video. So leave a comment below if you have. I'll see you guys later. Peace.